A lot of you are out there scrolling listings, thinking about buying a house in Kansas City this year. Maybe you're waiting for the right one to pop up, or just trying to avoid a big mistake. Well, here is the deal. You can catch huge red flags before you even set foot in the house.
In this video, we're breaking down the 3 biggest warning signs that you'll see right in the listing. Like when there's no photo or maybe simulated photos, or maybe it has high days on market, or maybe it's a totally renovated, like a new flip, but it's just lipstick on a pig.
All right, let's kick it off with the most obvious one. When the first photo and the front of the house isn't even on the listing, there's usually a reason.
Yeah, I can tell you what, you can tell a lot from photos. Let's give you a little backstory here. Max and I have been selling houses. I've been in it for over 26 years. I've literally seen thousands of houses online and then gone from there and walked through these properties. So I can tell you what, we can put our money where our mouth is on this one. No photos on the front, or even now what we're seeing a lot of is these simulated photos, especially with new construction, where you're like, oh, this house is great, looks great. And then you drive by the house and it's not even there. It's just a dirt lot. Or it's not even the right floor plan, because a lot of times builders in these subdivisions, they've got a couple that, they've taken photos of a couple of their build jobs, and they'll just paste those on every single lot or every single listing just to, get clicks, get you to call so you can get interested in building a house.
Yeah, photos. We hire professional photographers for all of our listings, but not everybody does. Another red flag is when there's terrible photos.
You don't see it too often anymore, but there's still people out there using their phone in portrait mode, taking pictures of houses and posting that in the MLS. And those are just all red flags of people just trying to either do this real cheap, and they don't know what they're doing, and they've hired an agent that has no clue.
Yeah, so sometimes with that lead photo, that first missing photo of the front of the house, there is usually a reason. Sometimes that's because it's coming soon and they haven't really began marketing it. You should know about pre-MLS and coming soon listings. So sometimes agents will put them on there to build up a little excitement before they ever hit the market, but it's really hard to do that when there's no photo involved. So that can be a red flag, but the biggest red flag about the missing photo is they're you're not proud of what it looks like, the front of the house. So you actually have to drive out and drive up in front of the house to see it, and end up wasting a lot of your time.
Yeah, and I will say nowadays, and we do it too, that after the property's been on the market for a few days, which we'll get to some day on market issues, but people will start rotating or changing the first photo that you'll see on the listing online. And they'll do that so you're like, oh look, it's a new listing, so you'll click on it and get back out there. And then after you get about 5 photos deep, you're like, oh, there's the front of the house I remember. So that happens a lot too, so be on the lookout for that.
Yeah, maybe the most interesting or marketable aspect about a house is the backyard, or that maybe it's on a lake and they want to highlight that beautiful lake view. So it might not, the most compelling photo might not be the front of the house. So I wouldn't say that's necessarily a red flag, but when there are no photos at all, then, kind of buyer beware right there.
Yeah, a lot you can tell from the photos. Let's talk a little bit about the things that we like to see in photos to save you maybe a little time when you're out there searching too. Some of my favorite things, or the first things I look for, is I do want to see the front of the house. I really want to see the elevation of the lot. And I want to make sure that the lot, for the most part, slopes away from the house. If I get to the backyard and I see there's a big hill sloping right to the back and there's a basement under that house, that I know when I get there, there's probably going to be signs of foundation issues, potentially, or a wall that might be moving. So when I get there, I'm looking for cracks. Other things that I like to see right out of the gate are, nice clean paint. I don't want to see a bunch of oxidized stuff on the outside, or maybe even screens on the windows that have holes torn in them because they've just, it just hasn't been taken care of. I want to get inside, I'm looking for consistent flooring, maybe modern flooring, carpet that doesn't have path wore through it. And I'm just quickly clicking, right? I can tell a lot about how a house has been cared for. I get to the kitchen, I want to see kitchens, I want to see master baths. That's the place you can spend the most money to get the biggest return, or adds a lot of value. So I'm looking for things like granite. I'm looking for painted cabinets that are nice and white and modern now with, a nice backsplash. I'm looking for stainless steel, nice appliances. I'm looking for gas 6-burner stoves if it has that. All the nice stuff. And then the same with the master bath. I'm looking for something that's updated. If it's a newer house, it's going to be updated. If it's a house that's 15, 20 years old, I'm looking that they've done some updates there. And then when we get down to the basement, I'm just, really quickly looking if it's finished. If it has low ceilings, there's going to be an objection to that because people want to be able to walk and not have to duck. So just a lot of that flow to the house and how it's updated and how it's been maintained.
Boy, Zach, you covered about 90% of that, but there are a few more things to think about. One of those is, if you're struggling to find the front of the house, is Google has a little tool where you can put the little guy on the street and get that Google Street View. That's a great way where you can actually put yourself there and, visualize that front of the house. And then right along the same lines of that thinking is the map tool. So Google will have a satellite map view where you can click on it, make sure that the photographer hasn't found a creative way of hiding that highway in the back of the backyard, and make sure, put yourself in the map and see if it's in the back of the cul-de-sac at a really nice spot, or if it's out on a busy corner. So definitely utilize that map tool. But lastly, that goes along with the simulated photos. You can see here, new construction simulates their photos. So this is basically just what the house is supposed to look like when it's built. When you go out there, it may be really frustrating because it's just a dirt lot. But another thing that goes along with that is virtual staging. We're seeing this a ton nowadays. If it's a vacant house that's really kind of worn down, they'll come in and virtually stage it, maybe even Photoshop it to clean it up and make it look nicer, especially with the yard and the sky. Photographers are notorious for going in there and making it look like $1 million when it actually is pretty unsightly. It's a brown yard and no grass growing. So you got to watch out for virtual staging.
Yeah. And another thing you brought to mind when you're talking about aerials is I always look at the roof too on the photos. If it's got a lot of staining on it, or even if it's wood shake shingles. Kansas City in the 90s, they kind of went through a phase where they did a lot of wood shake. And then insurance companies like Kansas City is not the place for wood shake shingles, between the rains and the fire hazard and the weather we have. And it's a big expense to get that switch back over to composite shingles. So looking for that can also be a thing you want to avoid, or a thing you're going to want to budget for when you buy the house, because you got a $26,000 roof replacement coming.
Yeah, so a lot can be gleaned when you're looking through photos, and a strange photo is a warning sign about a property's appearance. But what about a house that looks great but just won't sell? This tells us a completely different story, and that's about the deal itself.
Yeah, but we are talking on days on market, and the abbreviation for that you see all over all our realtor stuff is DOM. And yeah, it tells a big story. In fact, in Kansas City, in this market, especially over the last 2 years, anything over 30 days kind of perks my ears. I don't totally disqualify it if it's over 30 days, because you've also got to pay attention to your price point. The stuff at the lower price points, like more around our median, it's the median price point because there's more people buying that house than anybody else. So it happens a lot. There's more buyers. Those days on market usually go pretty quick, under 30. If that's over 30 at the average at 350 in Kansas City, then I'm kind of sniffing around. But as we move up in price point, we get into the 400 to 600,000, or the 600 to 800,000, or the $1 million plus. Those days on markets can tick up. That's normal to be higher, like maybe closer to 60, 90 days, because there's just less people shopping at that price point, so it takes a little more time. So in that scenario, days on market don't matter quite so much.
Yeah, why don't we pull up the MLS real quick and kind of illustrate our point for days on market and how it can affect a listing. All right, so high days on market often points to one of three things. The property is overpriced, or there's a serious condition issue that was revealed during inspections, or the seller could be just unrealistic or hard to deal with. Maybe they're a for sale by owner and just unwilling to work with buyer's agents, but usually it's overpriced or condition.
Yeah, and right here we have one pulled up. This is real time on our MLS right now that's active. It's been we've got days on market right here of 315 days. So that's definitely some red flags. So the first thing I do when I see that, if I have a client that really wants to see that house, because I'm wondering what's going on, is I'm gonna go and look at the property history on this. And I can see right here, we can go all the way back in time and see when it sold last, but it was coming soon. It hit the market back in August for $440, and then they've been slowly just whittling away at this price. Then they took a contingent offer, and then that looks like that fell through. Then they went back on the market accidentally for $1 and then brought it back up to 400. Active again, and then they had another contract, they went pending, and then they switched it to back up, and then now it's active and active again. So that means it's been through an inspection most likely. So then my next move after that is I go over to the documents or the supplements, and you can see there's going to be an inspection in here. And that's going to allow us to find all kinds of information about what was done on the property, along with the seller's disclosure, which now says it's new. So they updated that since they found out some things in this inspection. So this one just tells me that, you know, we're going to go in there. There's going to be some issues, probably a lot of condition issues if it's been on the market that long and been through several people, and that we might have some room for negotiation, actually.
Yeah, well, this one is illustrative of two problems. If you look at that property history, they started out too high at 440, and finally when they got to their price of 400, where they were getting offers, now all of a sudden condition issues were revealed. So this kind of tells both stories, but that is one of the things that we'll do is we'll get into it, dig into the details, find out what's been going on. Usually if it's just price, what happens is it's all about the buyer's mindset. So if they start off at that 440 price, a lot of times by the time the seller gets to 400, if it's been on the market for 90, 100 days, what goes through the buyer's mind is, well, why hasn't it sold yet? Even if there's not a condition issue, the buyer perceives there to be one. And so what we call that is the buyers become wary of the market. All of the good ones they see are selling quickly. Why isn't this one sold? So sometimes it's just a price issue and can be really an opportunity to buy it below fair market value. Say if that fair market value was 400, you might be able to scoop it up for 385 and get it at a discount, not because there's a condition issue, but just because the market has become wary. So we'll help you analyze whether it is just price, whether it is condition, because then you might be able to get a deal there too, but you have to factor in the cost of fixing that condition issue.
Yeah, and in a market like this, that's kind of one of our strategies too that we'll use with maybe buyers that have to be contingent. In this market, no seller is going to take a contingent buyer like in the first week or two because they want to test the market first. So we can set up these searches to where you only see stuff that's maybe been on the market for 30 days, and that'll give you an opportunity to maybe get a little bit more of a discount, or maybe to get the seller to accept a contingency. So there is a lot of tricks and ways that we can use days on market to the buyer's benefit, depending on the situation.
Yeah, depending on what your priorities are, if you're really looking for a deal, then we can manipulate the results so you can see potential opportunities.
Yeah. Yeah, it works both ways. Most real estate apps out there, you're going to be able to check that history on almost all of them. So definitely take a look at that. And then I will say, just to reiterate, if you see a property go pending and then go back to active, that means most likely there's been an inspection done and the seller is obligated to hand that inspection to a buyer or to an interested party. So definitely get your hands on that. And even though there may be nothing in there that scares you and you're still prepared to move forward, you still need to get your own inspector out there to inspect that property, because your inspector will carry an insurance policy that if they missed anything major, is going to be able to come back and, you know, help you rectify that. And since you didn't pay for the first inspection, you don't get that policy with that. So you have to hire your own inspector. So anyway, definitely recommend that. Plus that's 2 inspections on the one property that was already an issue for somebody else. So that's a great idea to have a second set of eyeballs on it.
Yep. Dealing with an unrealistic seller is frustrating, but dealing with a dishonest flipper can be downright catastrophic. Now let's talk about the biggest and most expensive red flag you might find in Kansas City, especially in our charming older neighborhoods.
Sold a flipped house to a client once. It was a horrible situation, but they had just remodeled the basement, looked great. And then it rained sometime that fall and the basement flooded, so they had to tear out sheetrock. Come to tear out the sheetrock and there's this huge horizontal crack right behind it. Inspectors can't look behind walls, so they didn't see it. So what we had was a dishonest flipper. And during that several months between when they find that to when we got to a lawsuit, the seller had died. So super unfortunate situation all the way around. There was nobody that you could go to for recourse. So man, you really got to watch your butt on those flips.
Yeah, and to all you flippers out there, that's bad karma. That might have been why you died. Yeah, no, I kid, but it really isn't funny. Zach and I flip a couple houses every year. If we find a house that might be a good opportunity, there's some money to be made, we do it to where we really think about improving the neighborhood and improving that property. And we have a reputation that we want to uphold, so we never really cut any corners or do anything dishonest. But we are few and far between as far as flippers go. There are a lot of shysters out there that are really just looking to make a quick buck. And you have to see the telltale signs that, you know, as you're walking through a house, I can usually look at it if it wasn't done right or if there's reflective cracks. Our inspector is really good at finding those issues also. He does a whole home elevation survey, because sometimes there's stuff that you can't see that because it's been hidden so well, you know, if the footing has settled. But we have ways to find this stuff and parse out whether it's lipstick on a pig or if it was really done well. You can often spot a flip by checking the tax records. If the owner is an LLC and they've only owned it for a few months, it's a flip. And we've got one here on the MLS, Zach. Why don't you kind of run us through it here?
Yeah, this one just sold. I was actually using this as a comp with a client, so I was kind of familiar with it. But yeah, if you go into the history, and we go right down here towards the bottom, we can see that 9/11 of 2024, they bought this property. And we can actually see that it's a remodeling company right there in the name. And then turned around and sold it, you know, just a few months later.
So yeah, when we're looking through the pictures, sometimes you can spot that flipper special by, you know, neutral paint colors everywhere. A lot of times you have cheap vinyl plank flooring.
This has no grass. Yeah, you know, yes, just a bunch of straw, but looks beautiful inside. You know, everything's nice and new and shiny.
Yeah, they actually have nice flooring. Yeah, but a lot of times you can see that they've just done a lot of the cosmetic upgrades, and sometimes you have to be careful because they've ignored some of the more expensive stuff.
Yeah, like usually you'll have a mirror over your sink. Not that that's super expensive, but you know, and blinds. You know, most of these flips don't come with blinds, so you've got some extra expenses walking into it.
But you know, you really have to watch out for foundation problems like Zach's horror story that he ran into. But the roof, the HVAC, the plumbing, the electrical, a lot of times flippers aren't going in there and upgrading the expensive items that people really care about. It's all that fancy cosmetic stuff that gets people excited.
The sexier F, yeah. That's the lipstick on the pig part. So you gotta be able to look beyond that. And a lot of things, you know, when I walk through any house, I'm looking for cracks over doorways. That tells you if the foundation's been moving, or repaired cracks, or even separations. I mean, all houses settle, especially in Kansas City. I guess if you're built on a rock somewhere, maybe not, but you know, in the kitchen between the backsplash and the countertop, you can get gaps there. So just looking for movement when I'm walking through a house.
Yeah, definitely scope the sewer line too, because that's something a flipper probably doesn't even look at, care about, or do anything. And on these older homes that are, you know, good candidates to become a flip, you really they have clay tile sewer lines, and a lot of times the tree roots will grow in there and you'll get offsets, and that can be a really expensive fix.
Yeah, anything what is older than 85 probably is gonna have clay tile sewer, which is like, you know, they're coming 1 foot sections and they're just stuck together with some little bit of cement that always falls out, and the tree roots get in and it shifts when the earth shifts. So after 85, they started doing PVC on a lot of houses, but it's still a great idea. I mean, I've never fixed a sewer line for less than $8,000. Yeah, so it's an expensive item. When you can send the scope down there for 100,
yeah,
it's a good investment.
The deeper it is, the more expensive it is too. So if it's, you know, 4 or 5 feet deep, it might be in that $8,000 range that Zach's talking about. Some of them are 30 feet deep though. If they're on a hill and they're coming, you know, comes down at a weird angle, I mean, it can be a fortune to dig a hole that deep to repair that thing.
Yeah, good point.
They do have pipe bursting technology and different solutions, so you don't have to dig all the way down, but just run a scope down the sewer line and check that.
Hey, so just to recap, when you are looking at flips, definitely focus on, after you've looked at the lipstick and you like everything, look at all the major components that are expensive. So look at the roof, make sure we're good there. Look at the HVAC system, the furnace and the air conditioner. Maybe check out the hot water heater, you know, they're pretty cheap. And then walk around that basement and look for any cracks or movement. Also, if you have a brand new kitchen, that's where, you know, it's a great place to invest money in the kitchens and master baths. So those have been updated nicely. And then of course, you know, new windows, doors, paint, all that kind of stuff on the exterior. So you're buttoned up tight, you don't have any maintenance for years to come.
All right, so those are the 3 big red flags to watch for on the property itself. But there is one more trap that you need to avoid, and it's the hidden in the listing description, and it's the supposed bonus.
Oh yes. Seller concessions, or that, what else do we see? The $5,000 carpet allowance, or seller will pay $5,000 of closing costs because they're getting desperate.
Yeah, so all these little gimmicks, these little incentives or concessions they call it, are when a seller agrees to pay a portion of the buyer's closing costs or offers some type of an allowance towards new carpet or upgrades or appliances, that sort of thing, they know they've got a problem, and they kind of offer you a little bit of an incentive so you can solve the problem instead of letting them do it up front.
Yeah, after you know, a lot of times as soon as you move into your home, you're paying your closing costs, you're paying your moving fees, you're getting new furniture, and you're getting the house all set up. And now you get a deal like, for instance, we have one right here where they're offering a $4,000 buyer allowance to be used for the flooring, paint, or closing costs. So just be like, hey, you can use it however you want. You know we got problems. So yeah, and now just what you want to do after you move all your stuff in is now move it all into the other room so you can paint this half of the house. And
yeah, so this is not a gift. This is a negotiation tactic. You know, they basically are baking it in. Rather than reducing the price, they are offering some type of incentive. And, you know, you just need to look at it like that, as a negotiation tactic, and not get caught up in the free money aspect of it.
Yeah, and something to beware, especially in a market like this, is let's say they're offering $4,000. Let's say you get this property for $375. You get them to come down and still give you $4,000. And this property, ideally you're buying this at market value, right? And the appraiser still has to come out and appraise this property. And now they come out to appraise it, and instead of $375 where you have the contract, it comes in at $370. And now the seller's giving you $4,000. So anyway, they're gonna have to come down to that price. You might lose that anyway, just to keep the deal together. So always be careful when you're trying to negotiate some cash into the transaction, because the bank, you know, they don't want a buyer. You know, you're putting down your 20% skin in the game because that's what the bank requires. And now you happen to be getting $4,000 back. The bank's not gonna like that. So you gotta also be careful how that's written up. It can be paid towards closing costs. It can be paid directly to a carpet company, but you're not gonna walk out of there with $4,000 cashy, just flipping it around like that.
Yeah, another one that is really common today, with interest rates being a little higher than they were a couple years ago, is they will even offer you incentive to buy down your rate. They can do it to buy it down permanently, or buy it down in steps every year, where it can, you know, decrease every year the amount that it's bought down. There's lots of little gimmicks and tricks out there, but really the best financial decision for you is to, you know, get rid of all the gimmicks and negotiate based on the price of the house. So if you're house hunting in Kansas City, you want to make sure that you have an expert looking out for all of these red flags and more, we would love to help. Our job is to protect our clients and find them a great home without all the hidden drama. All of our contact information is on the screen in the description below. Send us a text, give us a call, and we can start the conversation about your move.
Yeah, just to piggyback on that too, we had this love it or we'll sell it for free guarantee. So if you're not absolutely in love with the house that you buy when you work with us in that first year, we'll put it back on the market and it won't cost you a thing to sell it.
For free.
For free. All right, so now that you know what to avoid, let's talk about buying a house smart. And you can check that out on our next video, Buying a Home in Kansas City in 2025. Everything that you need to know so you can move forward with confidence. So go ahead and click on that. We'll see you over there on that one.
See you there.
Bye-bye.